The kidnapping was supposed to take exactly 30 seconds. One black SUV, 4 armed men, one future Mafia bride, delivered to Nicholas Romano before midnight. Nothing about the operation should have failed. Yet the moment the terrified woman woke inside the heavily guarded Romano estate, everything began to unravel. She didn't demand money. She didn't threaten revenge. She didn't negotiate like the notorious Victoria Morelli everyone in the underworld feared. Instead, she burst into tears after seeing the rifles pointed at her and quietly apologized for staining the expensive leather sofa with mud from her shoes. The room fell silent. This wasn't the ruthless woman Nicholas had spent years preparing to marry. This woman trembled every time someone raised their voice. She thanked the servants. She asked whether the injured guard outside had received medical treatment. And when Nicholas finally confronted her alone, she whispered through shaking breaths, I'm not Victoria. I'm Emma. I'm her twin sister." Nicholas stared at her for several long seconds before walking to the study door and locking it from the inside. Emma's heart nearly stopped. She expected him to call his men. Instead, he looked directly into her frightened eyes and said something far more chilling. "I already know." He stepped closer, lowering his voice until only she could hear. "And if anyone else discovers you're not Victoria, they'll kill you before sunrise." He paused only long enough for the weight of those words to sink in. "Which means," he said quietly, "starting tonight, you have to convince the entire Mafia that you're my wife." The rain had been falling over Chicago since sunset, washing the city's skyline into a blur of silver lights and dark shadows. Inside an armored black SUV, 6 men dressed in tailored black suits waited without speaking. Their earpieces crackled occasionally as encrypted messages flowed between vehicles scattered across the city. At the center of the convoy sat Nicholas Romano. At 35, he had built one of the most disciplined criminal empires on the East Coast. Newspapers called him a billionaire entrepreneur. Federal agencies suspected he controlled an international smuggling network. Rival families simply called him the Ghost, because nobody ever saw him coming until everything they owned belonged to him. Tonight wasn't supposed to involve violence. It was business. For almost 4 years, the Romano and Morelli families had negotiated a political marriage designed to end decades of bloodshed. Countless lives and billions of dollars depended on tonight's exchange proceeding without incident. Victoria Morelli would quietly leave her father's estate. Romano security would escort her to Nicholas's private residence. Within 48 hours, the underworld would celebrate the marriage that officially united 2 rival empires. Simple, predictable, controlled. Exactly the way Nicholas preferred. Marco Santini, his longtime head of security, glanced at his watch. "Target is leaving the charity gala." Nicholas barely looked up from the financial reports resting on his lap. Visual confirmation. "Our surveillance team confirms identical facial recognition." Marco hesitated for only a fraction of a second. The woman entered the scheduled vehicle exactly as planned. Nicholas closed the folder. "Proceed." Across the city, Emma Morelli adjusted the strap of her oversized canvas book bag as she exited the neighborhood community center. The charity reading program had lasted much longer than expected. Several second graders had insisted she finish one final chapter before leaving. Emma had never been good at saying no. Her students loved that about her. Her twin sister considered it a weakness. Emma smiled softly while placing handmade thank you cards inside her bag. One card read, "Thank you for making books feel like adventures." Another simply said, "You make school feel safe." She folded both cards carefully into her notebook. Those little notes always reminded her that kindness mattered, even if the rest of the world rarely rewarded it. Her phone vibrated. "Victoria." Emma answered immediately. "Hi." Victoria sounded irritated. "Where are you?" Just leaving the library program. I told you not to answer unknown calls tonight. Emma frowned. I haven't. Good. A long silence followed. Then Victoria spoke again, strangely distracted. If anyone asks, you haven't seen me today. Emma laughed nervously. Victoria, what are you involved in now? You don't want to know. I worry about you. You always do. Another pause. Then the call disconnected. Emma stared at the screen. Her sister had become increasingly secretive during the past several months. Their identical faces had fooled strangers all their lives. Their personalities could not have been more different. Victoria loved expensive clothes, corporate negotiations, and power. Emma loved classrooms, libraries, baking cookies for neighbors, and spending Saturday mornings reading to children whose parents worked double shifts. One twin was feared. The other was almost impossible to dislike. Emma sighed and started walking toward the subway station. She never noticed the black SUV slowing beside the curb. The side door exploded open. Everything happened in seconds. A gloved hand covered her mouth. Another wrapped firmly around her waist. Her canvas bag fell onto the sidewalk, spilling children's drawings across the rain-soaked pavement. She kicked. She struggled. She tried screaming. A needle touched her neck. The world tilted violently. The last thing Emma saw before darkness swallowed her was one of her students' handmade bookmarks floating into a puddle. Package secured. Marco spoke calmly into his radio. No witnesses capable of identification. The convoy disappeared into the night. Nobody inside the vehicles noticed the frightened woman had whispered one desperate sentence before losing consciousness. My students. Nearly 40 minutes later, the convoy entered the underground garage beneath Romano Estate. Steel security doors closed behind them with mechanical precision. Doctors waited. Bodyguards surrounded the vehicle. Marco opened the rear passenger door. The bride has arrived. Nicholas approached without visible emotion. Even now, he wasn't interested in romance. Marriage had always been another negotiation, another alliance, another responsibility. Nothing more. The unconscious woman was carefully carried upstairs to a luxurious guest suite prepared weeks in advance. Medical staff completed routine examinations. No weapons. No tracking devices. No injuries beyond a minor injection mark. Everything appeared normal. She should wake within an hour, the physician reported. Nicholas nodded once. Leave us. The room emptied. Silence settled over the mansion. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Inside, Emma slowly opened her eyes. Everything around her looked unfamiliar. Marble fireplace. The crystal chandelier. Fresh flowers. Guards outside the bedroom door. She sat upright too quickly. Pain shot through her head. Confusion quickly turned into panic. She stumbled toward the door. Locked. She rushed toward the windows. Bulletproof glass. She turned, just as the bedroom door opened. A tall man, in an immaculate charcoal suit, stepped inside. His calm expression revealed nothing. His dark eyes studied her with unsettling precision. Emma instinctively stepped backward. I think there's been a mistake. The man remained silent. My name is Emma. My sister is Victoria. You have the wrong woman. For the first time that evening, Nicholas Romano's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for someone watching carefully to notice that something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Emma's breathing came in shallow, uneven bursts as she stood with her back pressed against the bedroom wall. Every instinct told her to run, but every exit from the room was guarded. Nicholas Romano simply watched her. His expression remained unreadable. He had spent most of his adult life studying people before they spoke, before they lied, before they reached for hidden weapons. Victoria Morelli had been described in every intelligence report as ambitious, calculating, and almost impossible to intimidate. The frightened woman standing in front of him matched none of those descriptions. Her oversized cream-colored cardigan was still damp from the rain. Her shoes were inexpensive. There was a tiny ink stain on the side of her right hand. When she realized he had noticed it, she instinctively hid her hand behind her back, like an embarrassed schoolgirl. Not a trained negotiator. Not a Mafia princess. Not the woman he had agreed to marry. Emma swallowed. I don't know who brought me here. I don't even understand what's happening. My students are probably wondering why I never came back. The last sentence escaped before she could stop herself. Students. Nicola's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. You teach? She nodded cautiously. Second grade. Silence. Marco Santini looked from Emma to Nicholas with growing confusion. Boss. Nicholas raised one finger. Marco immediately fell silent. Nicholas walked toward Emma slowly, stopping several feet away to avoid appearing threatening. What subjects? Emma blinked. What? What do you teach? Reading, history, a little science, and art on Fridays. She answered automatically, still too frightened to understand why he was asking. Nicholas believed her, not because of the words, because nobody trained for organized crime would instinctively answer with the schedule of elementary school classes. Someone had switched the twins, deliberately. Nicholas turned toward Marco. Clear the room. Within seconds, every bodyguard disappeared. Only the three of them remained. Marco finally spoke. We return her. No. Marco frowned. The Morelli family will discover the mistake eventually. They already know. The room became perfectly still. Nicholas looked toward the rain-covered windows. This wasn't an accident. My surveillance team identified the correct vehicle, the correct security detail, the correct departure time. Someone changed only one variable. Emma. Marco's face slowly hardened. You think someone inside the Morelli family planned this? I know they did. Emma listened without understanding half of what they were discussing. She interrupted quietly. I'm sorry. Both men turned toward her. I really don't belong here. If you take me home, nobody has to know. Nicholas looked at her with something almost resembling sympathy. You still think home is safe? Emma nodded. Of course. He walked to a nearby table and opened a secure tablet. Several surveillance photographs appeared. One showed Emma leaving the community center. Another showed a black sedan parked across the street. A third showed two armed men watching her apartment building. Emma stared at the images. I've never seen them before. You weren't supposed to. Nicholas enlarged another photograph. One of the men was wearing the insignia of the Hale Syndicate, a rival organization that had been at war with both the Romano and Morelli families for years. They began following you 3 days ago. Emma looked up sharply. What? You were being watched before my men ever arrived. Her knees nearly gave out. She grabbed the back of a nearby chair for support. I don't understand. I don't know these people. I've never hurt anyone. I just teach children. I volunteer at the library. Her voice cracked. Why would anyone want me? Nicholas finally answered. Because someone wants your sister alive, and wants you dead. The color drained from Emma's face. My sister? Victoria? Is she in danger? Nicholas studied her carefully. Even now, even after learning someone wanted to kill her, her first concern wasn't herself. It was her sister. That single realization unsettled him far more than he expected. Marco received a message through his earpiece. His face changed immediately. Boss, what is it? The Morelli family just announced publicly that Victoria disappeared during tonight's charity event. Emma looked relieved. They're looking for her. Marco continued reading. No, they're accusing us. Nicholas took the tablet. The statement had already spread through encrypted criminal networks. The Morelli family claimed the Romano organization had abducted Victoria in violation of their marriage agreement. Within minutes, every major syndicate in the city would hear the news. Emma whispered, "But they know I'm not Victoria." Nicholas nodded slowly. Exactly. He looked directly into her eyes. They're lying. Everything suddenly fit together. The surveillance, the switch, the public accusation. Someone had created a crisis that could ignite another mafia war, and Emma was standing at the center of it, without ever choosing to be there. What happens now? Emma asked. Nicholas answered with brutal honesty. If I return you tonight, everyone involved will know I discovered the switch. They'll eliminate every loose end. You. My witnesses. Possibly even Victoria. Emma wrapped both arms around herself. So, I can't go home. No. I can't tell anyone. No. My family. They're no longer safe to contact. She closed her eyes. Everything she loved had disappeared in a single night. Nicholas walked toward the fireplace. For nearly a minute, he remained silent. Then he made a decision that would change both of their lives. He turned back toward Marco. Prepare the announcement. Marco stared. You mean, the wedding proceeds? But I know exactly who she is. Marco lowered his voice. The entire underworld expects Victoria Morelli. They'll recognize weakness immediately. They'll test her. They'll provoke her. They'll try to expose her. Nicholas answered quietly. Then we'll make sure they never get the chance. Emma looked between them in confusion. What announcement? Nicholas met her frightened eyes. Starting tonight, the world will believe Emma Morelli no longer exists. He took a slow breath. And Victoria Romano has officially become my wife. Emma's heart pounded so violently she could hear it. You can't be serious. I've never even met half these people. I don't know how your world works. I'll make mistakes. I'll ruin everything. Nicholas stepped closer. Yes, you probably will. But making mistakes is still better than attending your own funeral. He paused. And beginning tomorrow morning, I'm going to teach you how to survive among people who are waiting for you to fail. Outside, thunder shook the estate. Far across the city, inside the Morelli mansion, Victoria quietly folded away the newspaper, announcing her own disappearance. She looked toward the man standing beside the fireplace. Sebastian Morelli, her older cousin, the true architect of the conspiracy. Victoria smiled faintly. Did Romano accept the bait? Sebastian returned an equally cold smile. He has no choice. Neither of them realized that the woman they had condemned to die was about to become the one person capable of destroying everything they had spent years building. The next morning began at exactly 6 o'clock, not because Emma had slept, but because someone knocked precisely 3 times on her bedroom door. She had spent the entire night staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, wondering whether her apartment had been searched, whether her students thought she had abandoned them, and whether her sister even knew she was still alive. A calm female voice sounded from outside. Mrs. Romano. Emma instinctively answered. Yes? Silence. Then the woman corrected herself. I apologize. The staff has prepared your wardrobe. Emma froze. Mrs. Romano. The title wasn't meant for her. Yet beginning today, everyone inside the estate believed it was. When she finally opened the door, 3 women waited outside. Each carried garment bags, jewelry cases, and cosmetic kits. None of them smiled. One bowed politely. Your breakfast will be served after your fitting. Emma looked behind her, hoping Nicholas would somehow appear and explain everything. Instead, Marco Santini stepped into the hallway. The boss is waiting downstairs. 20 minutes later, Emma stood in front of an enormous mirror, wearing a tailored charcoal dress that looked as though it belonged on the cover of a luxury magazine. She hardly recognized herself. The dress fit perfectly. Too perfectly. One stylist carefully adjusted the fabric around Emma's waist. We prepared alterations based on Lady Victoria's measurements. Emma blinked. But I'm heavier than she is. The room fell awkwardly silent. One tailor looked horrified, assuming she had insulted herself. Before anyone could respond, Nicholas entered. He dismissed every member of the staff with a single glance. The room emptied immediately. Emma released a nervous breath. I ruined it already. No, they're simply not accustomed to hearing honesty. He handed her a leather folder. Lesson 1. Emma accepted it. Inside were dozens of photographs. Men, women, formal dinners, board meetings, funerals, charity galas. Each face contained handwritten notes. Emma looked up. What is this? The people most likely to kill you. For the next 3 hours, Nicholas transformed into a teacher, not a patient one, but an effective one. He pointed to the first photograph. Lucia Romano, my aunt. Never answer her first question. She's never asking what she actually wants to know. Another photograph. Vincent Hale. He enjoys making people uncomfortable. If he compliments you, assume he's laying a trap. Emma carefully memorized every note. By lunchtime, her head ached. There are so many. There are over 200 people attending tomorrow night's family banquet. Emma nearly dropped the folder. 200. You only need to survive conversations with 20. She looked horrified. That's supposed to make me feel better. For the first time since the kidnapping, Nicholas almost smiled. Training became stranger as the day continued. Marco entered carrying a tray with 3 wine glasses. Emma frowned. I don't drink. You don't have to. Nicholas sat opposite her. Victoria always held her glass with her left hand. Emma obediently switched hands. No. He gently corrected her posture. Never grip the stem that tightly. You look nervous. I am nervous. Exactly. He took the glass back. The point isn't pretending to be fearless. The point is preventing other people from noticing your fear. Hours passed. Walking. Posture. Eye contact. Greeting family members. Remembering names. Learning who could be trusted. Learning who absolutely could not. Emma struggled with nearly everything, except one unexpected skill. Observation. During lunch, she quietly interrupted Nicolas. The gardener limps. Marco looked confused. So, he favors his right leg. The stone path near the greenhouse must be uneven. Nicholas turned toward the window. The gardener had indeed begun limping earlier that week. No one had noticed, except Emma. Later that afternoon, another lesson began. This one involved lying. Emma failed immediately. I can't. You must. I've never lied to anyone. You've told children Santa Claus exists. That's different. Why? Because it makes them happy. Nicholas folded his arms. This lie keeps you alive. Emma had no answer. By evening, the estate's physician arrived. Dr. Elena Brooks carried a medical bag and a quiet smile. Unlike everyone else, she addressed Emma by her real name. How are you holding up? Emma's eyes filled unexpectedly. I'm trying. Elena checked her blood pressure before speaking softly. You know, fear doesn't make you weak. It means you understand what's at stake. Emma whispered. I don't belong here. Elena glanced toward Nicholas. He doesn't belong in your world either. Emma looked confused. What do you mean? He built this empire because he believed strength meant never needing anyone. Elena smiled gently. And now he's teaching an elementary school teacher how to survive organized crime. I'd say both of your lives have become equally strange. That evening, a security alarm suddenly echoed through the estate. Every light switched to emergency mode. Marco rushed into the library. Boss. "We've got visitors." Nicholas stood immediately. "Who?" "The Romano family council." Emma's stomach dropped. "I thought the banquet was tomorrow." "It is." Marco's expression darkened. "This isn't a social visit. It's Lucia." 5 black sedans rolled into the courtyard. Lucia Romano stepped out first. Elegant, silver-haired, perfectly composed. She carried no visible weapon, which made her infinitely more dangerous. Emma watched from the upstairs balcony. "She already suspects something, doesn't she?" Nicholas answered honestly. "Lucia suspects everyone." Minutes later, everyone gathered inside the grand drawing room. Lucia embraced Nicholas politely before turning toward Emma. Her sharp grey eyes lingered several seconds too long. "My dear Victoria." Emma forced herself to smile. "It's lovely to see you." Lucia stepped closer. "So, tell me, how is your favorite second-grade teacher?" Emma's heartbeat stopped. She stared blankly. Nicholas remained perfectly still. Lucia smiled wider. "Oh? I thought every bride remembered her favorite teacher." Emma suddenly remembered something from childhood. Mrs. Evelyn Carter. The woman who had inspired Emma to become a teacher. But Victoria had hated school. Would she know that name? Would she invent another? One wrong answer could expose everything. Emma took a slow breath. Then quietly replied, "I've learned that the people who teach us the most aren't always the ones standing at the front of the classroom." Lucia watched her carefully. "So you've become philosophical." Emma smiled politely. "Marriage changes people." Silence filled the room. Finally, Lucia laughed. "My nephew." She looked at Nicholas. "I believe your wife has become far more interesting than I expected." The conversation moved on. Emma resisted the urge to collapse. She had survived. Barely. Late that night, Nicholas found Emma sitting alone in the mansion's library. She was carefully repairing the torn spine of an old children's book she had discovered on one of the shelves. "You know," Nicholas said quietly, "most people would have spent tonight learning how to use a pistol." Emma didn't look up. This book was falling apart. It deserved better. He stared at her, surrounded by wealth, protected by armed guards, living inside one of the most feared estates in America. She was worried about a damaged children's book. At that exact moment, Nicholas realized something dangerous. He was beginning to hope the deception would last much longer than necessary. Because every hour Emma remained beside him, she changed the house, and perhaps she was beginning to change him. Neither of them noticed the tiny camera hidden inside an antique clock across the library. Miles away, Sebastian Morelli watched the live feed. He smiled coldly. "Excellent. They're starting to trust each other." He turned toward Victoria. "That means Phase 2 can begin." By sunset, every influential crime family on the East Coast had arrived at Romano Estate. More than 200 guests filled the marble ballroom beneath glittering crystal chandeliers. Politicians laughed beside smugglers. Corporate executives toasted beside men whose names had never appeared in public records. Power wore expensive suits. Violence wore perfect smiles. Emma had never seen anything like it. Standing beside Nicholas at the top of the grand staircase, she struggled to remember every lesson he had spent the previous day teaching her. Shoulders back. Slow breathing. Never answer immediately. Let silence work for you. Most importantly, never let anyone realize you're afraid. The orchestra began to play. Nicholas quietly offered his arm. "You ready?" Emma forced a tiny smile. "No." "Good." He glanced toward the crowd. The people who think they're ready usually die first. The ballroom erupted into applause as they descended together. Every eye followed them. Every whispered conversation stopped. Every rival family studied the new Mrs. Romano. Emma could almost feel hundreds of people measuring every movement she made. One mistake, one hesitation, one incorrect memory. That was all it would take. The first hour passed better than she expected. She remembered names. She repeated carefully rehearsed greetings. She answered questions without revealing anything personal. Several guests even commented that Victoria seemed calmer after marriage. Emma silently thanked heaven they believed kindness was simply maturity. Nicholas watched everything, not the guests. Emma. Each conversation strengthened her confidence. She wasn't becoming Victoria. She was quietly transforming the role itself. Instead of intimidating people, she listened. Instead of humiliating servants, she thanked them. Instead of demanding attention, she noticed everyone around her. Strangely, nobody questioned it. Many actually seemed relieved. Only one person appeared disappointed, Lucia Romano. From across the ballroom, her silver eyes never left Emma. Finally, she approached. "My dear." She smiled pleasantly. "I've arranged a small surprise." Emma's heartbeat quickened. "What kind of surprise?" Lucia gently clapped her hands. The orchestra stopped playing. The room fell silent. "I've invited someone who knew Victoria very well." A man stepped into the ballroom. Tall, well-dressed, confident. Vincent Hale. Emma recognized him instantly from Nicholas' photographs. Lesson 7. Never volunteer information. Let Vincent speak first. He enjoys testing people. Vincent kissed Emma's hand. "It's been too long." Emma smiled politely. "It has." He chuckled. "So, do you still carry your favorite lighter?" Emma froze. Lighter? Victoria smoked. Or perhaps she didn't. Perhaps this was another trap. Vincent waited. The silence stretched. Emma slowly met his eyes. "I've stopped carrying things that can be used against me." Several nearby guests exchanged impressed glances. Vincent smiled. "Clever answer. But that wasn't really my question." Before Emma could respond, Nicholas stepped between them. "My wife has answered enough questions for one evening." Vincent backed away politely. "My apologies." Yet the look in his eyes promised the conversation wasn't over. Across the ballroom, Sebastian Morelli observed everything. Hidden among dozens of respected businessmen, he looked completely ordinary. Exactly the way he preferred. Victoria stood several feet behind him, disguised beneath dark hair dye and colored contact lenses. She watched Emma with quiet disbelief. "She's actually doing it." Sebastian smiled. For now, he slipped a tiny flash drive beneath a champagne tray carried by one of the waiters. Time for the next act. Only minutes later, every screen inside the ballroom suddenly flickered. The orchestra stopped. The giant display behind the stage activated by itself. Guests turned toward it in confusion. Security rushed toward the control room. Too late. A surveillance video filled the screen. Emma gasped. It showed her, not as Victoria, as Emma, reading stories to second-grade children, helping them paint paper butterflies, laughing inside the community library. Every secret moment of her ordinary life unfolded before 200 of the most dangerous people in the country. The ballroom exploded into stunned whispers. Lucia slowly turned toward Nicholas. "What exactly are we watching?" Marco reached for his weapon. "Boss?" "No." Nicholas' voice remained calm. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking around the ballroom, searching. Someone inside this room had activated the footage, which meant the traitor was present. Emma stood frozen. Everything was over. The deception had failed. Children's voices echoed through the ballroom speakers. "Miss Emma, read another chapter." Laughter, applause, her students. Tears filled Emma's eyes. She had never imagined that the happiest moments of her life would become evidence against her. Lucia's expression hardened. "Who is Emma?" Silence. Nobody answered. Lucia looked directly at Nicholas. "I asked a question." Before Nicholas could speak, Emma stepped forward. He immediately caught her wrist. "Don't." She looked at him. "If I stay silent, they'll suspect everyone." Nicholas understood exactly what she intended. She was willing to sacrifice herself, to save him. Emma slowly walked toward the center of the ballroom. Every conversation stopped. She looked at the enormous screen one final time. Children waved happily from the recorded video. One little girl hugged her after finishing a book. Emma smiled through her tears. Then she turned toward the crowd. "Yes, my name is Emma." Gasps echoed across the room. Several bodyguards reached for concealed weapons. Lucia stared in disbelief. Nicholas stepped beside Emma without hesitation. The ballroom prepared for violence. Instead, Emma did something nobody expected. She looked directly at every crime boss present. Those children, they don't know who you are. They don't care how much money you have. They don't care whose territory you control. They only care whether an adult keeps their promises. She took another breath. "I promised them I'd always protect them. So tonight, I'm keeping another promise." She pointed toward the giant screen. "Someone in this room is using innocent children to start a war." Silence. Absolute silence. Nicholas suddenly understood. The footage itself wasn't the attack. The footage proved someone had spent months secretly watching Emma, long before the kidnapping. Only a handful of people knew her routine. Library, school, volunteer schedule. Someone inside the Morelli organization had been collecting intelligence for months. He turned sharply. "Marco, seal every exit. No one leaves." Panic spread instantly. Guests protested. Security teams rushed toward the doors. At that exact moment, Emma noticed something everyone else had missed. One waiter wasn't frightened. He was leaving. Calmly. Too calmly. Balanced on his serving tray sat an empty slot, exactly the size of a flash drive. Emma pointed. "Him!" The waiter broke into a sprint. Gunfire erupted. Guests screamed. Crystal shattered. Marco tackled the fleeing man before he reached the service corridor. The flash drive fell across the marble floor. Nicholas picked it up. Encrypted. Military grade. Not Morelli encryption. Not Romano encryption. Someone else. Within minutes, Elena Brooks finished copying the files. She looked up in shock. "Nicholas, you need to see this." The ballroom projector activated again. This time, not children's videos, bank transfers, encrypted communications, payment records, surveillance orders. Every file traced back to one name, Sebastian Morelli. More importantly, one final video appeared. Recorded only 3 nights earlier, Victoria Morelli sat across from Sebastian inside a private office. Everyone in the ballroom watched in stunned silence. Victoria's voice echoed through the speakers. "Switch Emma. Romano will protect her. While everyone hunts the wrong woman, we'll take control of both families." The room erupted. Every lie, every betrayal, every death planned over years, collapsed in less than 60 seconds. Far across the ballroom, Sebastian slowly smiled. Then he quietly pulled a pistol from beneath his jacket and aimed it directly at Emma. The gunshot never came. The instant Sebastian raised his pistol, Nicholas moved. He shoved Emma behind him with one powerful motion as 3 Romano bodyguards opened fire. The ballroom erupted into absolute chaos. Guests dove beneath tables. Crystal chandeliers trembled from the deafening explosions. Sebastian fired twice. One bullet shattered a marble column. The second grazed Nicholas's shoulder before Marco Santini tackled Sebastian to the ground. Within seconds, every weapon in the room was aimed at the traitor. Don't! Emma screamed. Everyone froze. Nicholas turned in disbelief. Sebastian lay bleeding, unable to escape. Emma stepped cautiously around Nicholas. If you kill him now, everyone will say he died before telling the truth. She looked directly at Sebastian. You spent months using innocent people. You watched children. You tried to murder your own family. But you're too proud to let someone else tell your story. Sebastian laughed bitterly. You think you've won? Emma quietly shook her head. No, I think you're tired. Those simple words landed harder than any threat. For the first time all evening, Sebastian's confident smile disappeared. 45 minutes later, federal agents surrounded Romano estate, not because someone had betrayed Nicolas, because Nicolas himself had delivered every encrypted file recovered from Sebastian's flash drive. Years of financial crimes, illegal trafficking routes, offshore accounts, political bribery, enough evidence to dismantle several criminal organizations at once. Marco looked stunned. You could have destroyed every rival family with this. Nicholas answered calmly. I don't want another war. I want it finished. Victoria Morelli was arrested before sunrise while attempting to leave the country aboard a private jet. When investigators confronted her with the recordings from the ballroom, she finally confessed. The kidnapping had never been a mistake. She had chosen Emma herself. Emma was kind, predictable, trusting, exactly the kind of person Nicholas would instinctively protect. While the Romano family focused on keeping Emma alive, Sebastian intended to seize control of both criminal empires from the shadows. The plan had been nearly perfect, except for one detail. Neither conspirator had expected Emma to remain herself. 3 weeks later, the newspapers exploded with headlines. Multiple crime figures arrested. Corruption network exposed. Morelli succession collapses. Romano Enterprises announce major restructuring. No article mentioned Emma, exactly the way Nicholas wanted it. Life inside Romano estate became strangely quiet. For the first time in years, there were no emergency meetings, no midnight gunfire, no political marriages to negotiate, only silence. One afternoon, Emma wandered into the mansion's library, carrying a box of children's books. Nicholas looked up from his desk. What's all this? I noticed the staff's children have nowhere to read after school. So, she smiled shyly. I thought we could turn this room into a library once a week. He stared at her. This mansion has over 80 rooms, and you choose this one. It's my favorite. Why? Because it's where nobody pretends. Nicholas slowly closed his laptop. Over the past month, she had changed everything. Servants laughed more. Security guards smiled. Fresh flowers appeared throughout the estate because Emma kept thanking the gardeners. Even Marco, whose vocabulary usually consisted of tactical instructions, had somehow become the volunteer coach for the employees' children's soccer team. None of them understood how it had happened. Emma hadn't demanded change. She had simply treated everyone as though they mattered. One rainy afternoon, Emma quietly packed her suitcase. Nicholas found her folding sweaters into a travel bag. His chest tightened unexpectedly. What are you doing? She smiled sadly. It's over. The investigation is finished. My identity isn't a secret anymore. I can finally go home. She looked around the enormous bedroom. You've done more than enough for me. I'll never forget it. Nicholas didn't answer. He simply walked to the window. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass. Weeks earlier, that same sound had accompanied the night she was kidnapped. Everything had changed since then, including him, especially him. Without turning around, he asked quietly, "Home?" Emma nodded. "My apartment. My classroom. My students. They'll probably think I disappeared forever." Nicholas finally faced her. "And after that?" She hesitated. I don't know. He walked across the room until only a few feet separated them. When this arrangement began, I wanted Victoria. I believed power was the most valuable thing another person could offer. Emma looked down. You were wrong. I know. He smiled for the first time, without restraint. I was completely wrong. He reached into his jacket. Emma immediately recognized the velvet ring box. She laughed nervously. Nicholas, don't. You don't owe me anything. I wasn't your real wife. No, he gently interrupted. You never were. He opened the box. Inside wasn't the enormous diamond originally prepared for the political marriage. Instead, a simple platinum band, elegant, timeless, chosen only days earlier. I bought this after the investigation ended. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to ask a different question. He took a slow breath. The woman I was supposed to marry taught me how to negotiate. The woman standing in front of me taught me how to become a better man. You walked into this house terrified. You protected people who had every reason to frighten you. You reminded an empire that strength without kindness eventually destroys itself. He looked directly into her eyes. So, I'm not asking you to become Mrs. Romano because our families demand it. I'm asking because, when you leave this house, it no longer feels like home. Silence filled the room. Emma laughed through her tears. You know, you never actually learned how to propose. A rare look of uncertainty crossed Nicola's face. I didn't? She wiped her eyes. No, you're supposed to ask. He blinked once. Then, almost awkwardly, he knelt. Emma covered her mouth. Nicholas Romano, the man feared by politicians, rival syndicates and international criminals, looked genuinely nervous. Emma Morelli, will you stay beside me? Not because you're pretending to be someone else, but because you're exactly who you are. Emma didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, wrapped both arms around him, and whispered the only word that mattered. Yes. 6 months later, Romano Estate looked completely different. The former strategy room had become a children's learning center for employees' families. The library hosted weekly reading afternoons. Scholarship programs quietly funded hundreds of public school students across the city. Whenever reporters asked why Nicholas Romano had suddenly become one of the state's largest educational donors, he always gave the same answer. I married a teacher. He never mentioned the kidnapping. He never mentioned the conspiracy. Only Emma knew that every time he visited a classroom, he still smiled exactly the way he had the first time he watched her read stories to children, because the woman he had been ordered to protect had ended up rescuing him instead.